Hi everybody, my name is Jeff Strauss, and this is part 3 of my 3-part series on teams. Thanks for joining in, really appreciate it. Hope you saw and liked parts 1 and 2, which you can find on my website, jeffstrauss.net, and you can find them also, links to them on my social, Strauss on Leadership, both on TikTok and Instagram. Let's get into part 3. In part 3 today, we are going to be discussing emotional intelligence and why the emotional intelligence of groups in particular is important to team cohesion and performance. And we're also going to be going through a recap of the first 2 parts of this series, which are really in-depth looks at how teams operate and what drives team performance. So in this series, we've spoken at length about how teams form and the processes, skills, traits, and structures of individuals, teams, and organizations that contribute to high-performance teams. But there's a foundation that underlies the abilities of teams to achieve high levels of participation, cooperation, and collaboration. And that's emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence, or EQ, is a common analog to IQ insofar as it's a measurement of an individual's capacity, but this is incomplete because to achieve a high-performance team, we must discuss the emotional intelligence of groups, not just of individuals. 3 basic conditions must be met before participation, cooperation, and collaboration can occur. Mutual trust among members, a sense of group identity, or a feeling among members that they belong to a unique and worthwhile group, and a sense of group efficacy, or a belief that the team can perform well and that group members are more effective working together than apart. Now, we discussed the development of norms in stage 3 of the team life cycle in part 1, norming. And at this stage, and even beyond, establishing emotional norms are crucial. For example, interpersonal understanding is a norm that can be established by working to accurately hear and understand one another's feelings and concerns, thereby increasing team member morale and a willingness to cooperate. Another norm that can be established is perspective taking. So in this emotional norm, a team would pause during discussions if there are alternative perspectives or debates around the direction a team should take, rather than proceed based on a majority vote or the autocratic decision of a team lead. And we talked a little bit about this in the previous part 2, when we came to the voting paradox. So you can use an exercise to build this norm on a team, which could be a role-playing scenario in which members adopt each other's opinions or even styles of interactions. The key to perspective taking is to remove the mechanical combination of perspectives. In other words, person 1 said X, person 2 said Y, so our new perspective is X plus Y. Instead, the way to use perspective taking is to build emotional intelligence and trust to ensure that team members see one another making the effort to grapple with different perspectives. Caring behavior is another norm that can be fairly easily established. Establishing norms that reinforce caring behavior is usually a matter of concentrating on little things, like when an individual is upset, it may make all the difference to have group members acknowledge that person's feelings, like giving thanks for the sacrifice it can sometimes be to participate. A positive conflict is another norm that can be established to help develop the emotional intelligence of groups. Conflict is positive when it causes people to consider different ideas and alternatives, helps build cohesiveness as people learn more about each other, or results in increased participation or commitment to the decisions or goals of the team. In one manufacturing team that researchers studied, a team member told researchers about a day she decided to extend her break. Before long, one of her teammates stormed into the break room and said, "What are you doing in here? Get back out on the floor. Your team needs you." The woman had overstepped her bounds and got called on it. There were no hard feelings because the woman knew the group valued her contributions. Another example are teams with members who have conflicting norms for decision making. We should always be aware of analysis paralysis, but there are those who favor quick decisions when they consider all data to be evaluated, and others who prefer a more moderate or slower approach. Establishing a system for settling on a decision will help avoid stalemates. And we can also recall from the previous part of this series, part 2, where we discussed the different characteristics and traits of different cultures. Some cultures might be more quick to make a decision, where others might be a little bit more temperate in their decision-making process. So these norms build trust and a sense of group identity, and all of them can be established in teams where they don't arise naturally. And as a leader, you should be investing your time and energy in establishing these norms. Teams are at the very foundation of many organizations, and they will not work effectively without creating resources for working with emotions, fostering an affirmative environment, and encouraging proactive problem solving. So emotionally intelligent teams are also attuned to the broader organizational context. In other words, they don't act as cliques, but instead they understand how their team's work impacts others in the organization, and they are able to frame and communicate their own needs in ways that engender partnership, not isolation. One way to start becoming aware of the environment is by building bridges with other teams or units in the organization. In my own leadership practice, I do this in 2 ways. First, I set up monthly syncs with leaders from around the company. Even if we just sit and chat for a few minutes, building and maintaining these relationships is important. Often we discuss what work each of our teams has in progress. Sometimes we discover opportunities to work more closely with each other. And, by trying to replicate this sort of, let's meet at the coffee maker type or water cooler type chat, you sometimes gain contextual and situational awareness that you might not have otherwise had. Second, I empower my team with the autonomy and authority to have these discussions themselves. They don't need to wait for me as the director to give them permission. By doing this, my team has the opportunity to interact with all levels of the organization, from individual contributors to directors or senior leaders in many business units, which develops their own competence and confidence. It builds trust in our team because everyone on it is known as someone who can get the job done, and it allows us to be nimble and move. The following is an excerpt from Building the Emotional Intelligence of Groups by Vanessa Druskat and Stephen Wolf. Emotional intelligence is about the small acts that make a big difference. It is not about a team member working all night to meet a deadline. It is about saying thank you for doing so. It is not about in-depth discussions of ideas. It is about asking a quiet member for his thoughts. It is not about harmony, lack of tension, and all members liking each other. It is about acknowledging when harmony is false, tension is unexpressed, and treating others with respect. So let's talk a little bit about overcoming blockers. Researchers found strategies that the most successful teams and managers they interviewed used to overcome challenges, which they grouped into 4 categories: adaptation, structural intervention, managerial intervention, and exit. For each of these strategies, we'll discuss 2 representative problems that characterize the strategy, along with 2 enabling situational conditions that contribute to the problem, and finally a strategy that can be employed to solve the issue. So adaptation, one of the 4 categories, involves acknowledging gaps openly and resolving them or working around them when necessary. Adaptation is the ideal strategy because the team works effectively to solve its own problems with minimal input from management and, most importantly, learns from the experience. So 2 problems that can be resolved through adaptation are conflicts, misunderstandings, or stonewalling arising from decision-making or communication differences. And 2 enabling conditions for these problems are team members attributing a challenge to culture, be it work or personal background, like work culture or personal background, rather than interpersonal conflict, and a higher level manager is not available to help resolve. Or, and this can be quite common, the team would be too embarrassed to involve a manager. So how do we use adaptation as a strategy to overcome these conflicts? One powerful approach is called fusion, where teams integrate their differing approaches to decision making to reach a higher quality decision. So adaptation comes down to communication, which we've discussed at length in this series, particularly in part 2. So ensuring that lines of communication don't break down is critical for adaptation to occur. Another approach I've used with my team is called question storming, which I learned from a great book called A More Beautiful Question. Essentially, rather than brainstorming during which statements are made to try to solve a problem, question storming only permits questions to be asked with the hope that a more beautiful question arises to lead the team to a more beautiful solution. If you haven't read the book A More Beautiful Question, highly recommend it. My team uses this to come up with our OKRs every quarter, and I really think it's a great method to help achieve a better solution by asking the right questions. So finally, for adaptation to work, team members must be exceptionally self-aware and have a high degree of emotional intelligence, because negotiating a common understanding takes time, and it takes an understanding and acceptance of the nuance of everybody's interpersonal behavioral style, culture, context, intersectionality, etc., etc. So a high degree of emotional intelligence is crucial for adaptation to work. Structural intervention is a deliberate reorganization or reassignment designed to reduce interpersonal friction or to remove a source of conflict for one or more groups. And structural intervention is the second of those 4 categories I mentioned. Adaptation being the first, structural intervention number 2. 2 problems that can be resolved through structural intervention include emotional tensions that can be triggered in many ways, like perceived status differences among teammates, and structural intervention can be an appropriate choice if adaptation fails and the team's tasks or projects can be subdivided. So structural intervention can be extremely effective when obvious subgroups demarcate the team. For example, headquarters versus national subsidiaries, or there are clear subject matter experts in different domains. Hierarchical threats are a representative problem that can require structural intervention. And in one example that researchers highlighted, a team manager had a team meet face-to-face twice a year to identify a set of values that the team would use to direct and evaluate its progress. At the first meeting, the manager realized that when he started speaking, everyone else shut down, waiting to hear what he had to say. So he hired a consultant to run future meetings. The consultant didn't represent the hierarchical threat and was able to get much more participation from team members. Now, you don't have to hire a consultant to do this. Sometimes having someone on your team run meetings is a great development opportunity and a way to get team members talking. Or you could have someone from another area of the business be a guest team leader or participant. Another option for structural intervention is breaking the team up into smaller working groups for projects and changing the membership of the working group regularly, though subgrouping comes with its own set of risks, like fracturing cohesion and introducing friction to streamline processes. So this approach relies actually on another structural intervention. Someone must become a mediator to see that various pieces come together seamlessly. Now, managerial intervention is the third of the 4 categories, and it's a deliberate involvement of team leadership acting as arbitrator or judge, making a final decision without team involvement. Managerial intervention used judiciously can effectively sort out problems. And 2 problems that can be resolved through structural intervention through managerial intervention include violations of the team's hierarchy and absence of foundational elements, like norms, for example. The former, hierarchy violation, tends to occur when roles are not clearly defined on teams or when people don't know who's on a team. So recall that earlier in this series I discussed why teams work, and 2 of those reasons are that teams are real. In other words, people know who's on the team and what role they play, and they have a supporting enabling structure which includes ground rules, processes, and norms. Managerial intervention can also be appropriate when emotions are running high on the team, when the team has reached an impasse and cannot work themselves out of it with adaptation and structural intervention is not appropriate, or when a manager is willing and able to intervene to help correct the situation. So managerial intervention to set norms early in the team's life cycle, as we discussed in the team life cycle part of this series, is crucial to setting the team off on the right foot and avoiding some of the situational conditions and complicating factors that require managerial intervention later. Another way to avoid some of the representative problems requiring managerial intervention is to provide team members an explicit mechanism to influence the decisions and direction of the team, ensuring they can contribute in a predictable and useful way. So having a manager intervene in team processes can create a dependence on managerial input, or at the other end of the spectrum, can create resistance to or resentment of management for stepping in. I've seen both of these happen on large teams that have undergone routine structural interventions like mergers without clear norms, role definitions, or full understanding of the final vision. Teams either become dependent on management because not enough foundation is developed or information is shared, which ultimately leads to resentment because team members feel ill-equipped to do their jobs and express their competencies fully. So in my personal experience, I've actually left jobs in these circumstances because I started to realize that the only competency I was actually strengthening was my ability to manage stress, which leads me to the final strategy of the 4 strategies we've discussed. And that is exit. Exits should be a strategy of last resort, but can be considered when a team member cannot adjust to the challenges at hand, has become unable or unwilling to contribute to the team, or is otherwise beyond the point of intervention. Exits usually take place if a team is disbanded, either because of a reorg or because of the nature of the team was always temporary rather than permanent. We see this a lot with tiger teams, which are brought together to accomplish a specific short-term task or project, or with people brought into teams as consultants, contractors, or interns, positions known to be short-term or not permanent in duration. However, it's also possible that a particular team member is unable or unwilling to contribute to the team and other interventions haven't worked. At a previous job where I built a team, one team member who was already on the team when I inherited it, refused the additional responsibilities the team was undertaking as we were growing and expanding our capabilities. Now, I've said before that I hire AA candidates with the right attitude and aptitude. This individual was certainly not displaying the right attitude, and based on previous work, I doubted his ability to be successful on the growing team. An exit was, unfortunately, the best and most graceful option for this individual. How to gracefully exit a team member is beyond the scope of this presentation, but suffice to say that exit should occur after clear expectations have been set, opportunities have been provided for team member to meet those expectations, and whatever coaching is appropriate is provided to set that team member up for success. On my website, jeffstrauss.net, you can find my writing on employee engagement and feedback, which are 2 components to successful team management that can help avoid exiting a team member with strategies to improve their output. So we've gone through, in parts 1 and 2 of this presentation, everything about teams, from how teams are formed to the key factors of communication and process that help develop teams, to the organizational context necessary to contribute to team success, to finally emotional intelligence and overcoming blockers with 4 different strategies here in this part of the presentation. Now we're going to recap the key concepts from parts 1, 2, and 3 before we shut it all down, and I thank you for your time, finally, for my presentation on teams. So to conclude our series, let's briefly recap some key concepts we discussed. 1. What is a team? A team is 2 or more individuals who, 1, exist to perform organizationally relevant tasks, share 2 or more common goals, interact socially, exhibit task interdependencies, maintain and manage boundaries, and are embedded in an organizational context that sets boundaries, constrains the team, and influences exchanges with other units in the broader entity. Remember that there's a difference between a team and a working group, and that teams can be functional, cross-functional, or self-directed. They can make, run, or do things, or recommend things. And at the foundation of high-performance teams is a collection of diverse, emotionally intelligent people. The life cycle of a team includes 5 stages. Forming, characterized by feelings of excitement or anxiety and questions about roles and expectations. And in this stage, structure, goals, direction, and roles are created. Trust is developed through communication, and a team mission, vision, or tenets should be established. During this stage, you should expect team accomplishments to be low. Storming, characterized by feelings of frustration or anger as the team tests responses to differences in conflicts. Behavior can be contentious at this stage, requiring a leader to refocus or recalibrate the team's efforts and reinforce the values of behavior and communication set in the forming stage. The third stage is norming, characterized by the team's ability to resolve conflicts, settle into norms and rituals, and improve cohesion through dialogue, acceptance, and recognition of one another's differences. The norming stage is a good place to start taking baseline measurements of team performance to compare with later stages. The fourth stage is performing, characterized by feelings of satisfaction and positivity as the team develops their strengths and insights. Team members show a greater level of commitment, and leaders should celebrate team accomplishments to positively reinforce successful behaviors. The fifth stage is sometimes omitted, but when it's not, it's adjourning, characterized by mixed feelings and morale as a team prepares to be disbanded. Focus and productivity begin to wane, and closing rituals should begin, including closing tasks and projects, reflection on team activities and processes, and recording the knowledge that was learned during the formation of the team and the life cycle of the team, and finally, celebration of the team's efforts. Teams tend not to work optimally when they are poorly coordinated and motivated, when they are unbounded or directionless, exhibiting absences of trust, avoidance of accountability, and lack of commitment, when they are brand new and haven't been structured with the foundational elements necessary for their success, when they are unsupported by the organization or enabling structures, or when a team is created unnecessarily or for the wrong reason, dooming it from the start. Teams tend to fail when they are too large or complex, leading to less collaboration or too many cooks in the kitchen. And finally, poor communication is a surefire way to ensure the team performs suboptimally. Now, conversely, teams work when team members know who's on a team, what their roles are, and what the team's scope is. A compelling direction is crucial for a team. During the stages of the team life cycle, an aspirational North Star should be created to give the team purpose. Teams need a supportive organization and enabling structures, including a reward system, support from human resources, and access to information. Well-designed tasks, the right number and mix of members, or clear and enforced norms of conduct are also crucial. Teams need expert coaching in team processes, especially early and late in the team life cycle. Coaching can help transform broad directives into specific and measurable outcomes. Effective communication skills are crucial to team success. Successful characteristics of communication include keeping communication short and sweet. Keep it short and sweet. A high number and the correct nature of exchanges, which researchers call energy. We discussed this at length in part 2. High engagement, which is the distribution of energy among team members. We also discussed this in part 2. And exploration, also discussed in part 2, which are communications that team members engage in outside of their teams.
Teams also need strong processes for success. The most successful teams are made up of the correct people and have strong decision and change management processes. These processes include who should be on the team and what they should be doing, how decisions are made, how to overcome obstacles and impasses through adaptation, structural or managerial intervention, or strategized exits, the 4 concepts that we just discussed a moment ago, and how to clearly define outcomes. Now, high-performance teams are supported by executives who can help build and maintain social relationships throughout the organization and model collaborative behavior. They're supported by HR, who can help the team invest in the right skills and support a sense of community. They're supported by team leadership, who can help guide the team in numerous ways. And they have a well-designed team structure, which enable team members to leverage existing relationships and other measures that cultivate networks and support clearly defined and well-understood roles. High-performance teams also have a high degree of emotional intelligence. They exhibit a strong sense of mutual trust, group identity, and group efficacy. They establish emotional norms, and they're attuned to the broader organizational context in which they operate. Emotional intelligence is sometimes discounted or dismissed as a contributor of performance, but it's wrong to do that. Empathy, social skills, self-awareness, self-regulation, and motivation, the characteristics of emotional intelligence, are key to being a high-functioning member of any group and a high-functioning leader. These traits and the skills, strategies, and processes discussed in this series lay a strong foundation for high-performance teams and will improve the performance of teams that are struggling to reach their full potential. We have come to the end of my series on teams. This has been part 3, where we discussed emotional intelligence, overcoming blockers, and the key concept recap of parts 1, 2, and 3 of this series. I really, really appreciate your time. If you've watched all of the almost 2 hours of video on this topic, I really, really appreciate your support. I hope that this has helped you. Over the last several weeks that I've been putting this presentation together, I've poured over decades of research and tried to consolidate the most important information that you as a leader or a team member should know to help create the high-performance team that you want to lead and the high-performance team that you want to be on. So if you found any of this information helpful or informative, please like and subscribe to my channel to get notified of all of my content. I post training like this and other content regularly. You can also subscribe to my Substack at jeffstrauss.substack.com, where I release written content on management and leadership, all completely for free, as is my YouTube, as is my website. All my content, all for free. You can see all of these links, get all of this information and more on my website, jeffstrauss.net. Soon is going to be coming a boot camp series. This is actually going to be almost a curriculum of work for leaders, a management boot camp or a leadership boot camp. So it'll have all of these sort of videos that I'm doing in sort of disparate fashion, a video on feedback here, a video on interviewing here, a video on teams here, and I'm actually putting these into a curriculum that a new leader can go through to help build the skills, traits, competencies, abilities, and help develop innate talents to help you really express your full potential as a leader and as a member of any team or organization that you're on. So check that out, soon to come on jeffstrauss.net. Please like, share, and subscribe this content on any platform you've seen it. I really appreciate your support. I love making this content. It's just as much a learning opportunity for me as it is for anybody else that gets this out of it. So I thank you once again. Go out there and lead.